Welcome to the Burnout Detox Podcast. I'm your host, Sophie. I'm an award-winning people and culture executive, keynote speaker, coach, and the founder of the Burnout Detox Project. Now, for more than a decade, I help companies build high-performing teams and cultures across fast-growing businesses. But behind the scenes, I was burning out over and over again. So I saw the side of success nobody talks about openly. So each week, I bring you raw conversations, expert insights, and honest stories that will help you navigate your toxic workplace, rebuild your confidence, and finally understand what success should never demand from you. So if you press play today, it means some part of you is ready for that to change. Wherever you're listening from, welcome. And let's get into today's episode. Well, welcome, Theresa. I know that it's been a long-awaiting conversation that we've been meaning to have. So welcome on today's shows today.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here.
Exciting. So let's just kick it off the way we always do. You've spent 2 decades, or maybe more than that, in HR that you've said, and which also means it tells me that you've seen burnout from every angle possible. So tell me, in your own words, what's your association with burnout?
Wow, I wouldn't say every angle possible, but quite a few. So I obviously have had touch with employees that face burnout. I saw it from the employer side. And my association with burnout is in a way that I think we box it very much. It seems to be like a very corporate workplace problem, but it is much bigger than that. And the increase in burnout in general now makes me think that there is much more to it than what we call like a burnout, exhaustion, depression.
Interesting. So, as you said, even in your career in the past, you've supported countless people through burnout. But have you had it or have you encountered it personally, and how did it come up? How would you describe burnout for yourself?
I have supported people in burnout, but I did not face burnout myself. I had a different situation to deal with. So it showed up in a different way because I got sick with an autoimmune disease. So it was not let's say, a burnout story, but has very related to it. And once I changed my life in a certain way, then also that disappeared. And I was, if you may say, healing or recovering, although it wasn't really a burnout situation.
It's really interesting when I hear people say that they have people around them that obviously experiences burnout, but they themselves don't. Now, I've also spoken to a couple of the guests in the last season that they realize there must be something that they're doing right in their lives. I'm not saying that everybody who goes through burnout does something wrong, but they've also learned from the people around them that they've created this kind of like buffering mechanism around them that actually avoids burnout altogether. So do you believe that perhaps there was something in your rhythm, in your day-to-day, perhaps in your mindset or lifestyle at all that you felt, maybe that was a buffer that was helping you kind of navigate through burnout in reality?
That's such a good question. I would say even in my corporate days, but also today, I would say I was always very good at setting boundaries in the workplace. Maybe not so much in my personal life, but in the workplace, setting boundaries felt okay and maybe not easy, but it was, I would say it was a habit that I had. So, for example, when I went on holiday, I was on holiday. I did not do the emails on holiday. For example, it was easy for me to switch off. I think that was probably one thing. And the second thing is my life did not only revolve around work. I have a very diverse friends group. Many of them were never in, let's say, what we call the corporate world. So I had always very different interests and influences that gave me a life beyond the office and what maybe would call the grind. I saw many different concepts of life, and I was really focused on spending times with my friends and joy. And I see that many people really devote their complete life to work, and even their social life revolves around work. Specifically, I was an expat, for example. Then you move to a new country, all your friends are your work friends. So basically, work continues even when you're over a glass of wine. And that was, I think, for me, very important that I didn't do that only, that I had friends and in a social circle that was completely different and that allowed me to balance and to equalize in that sense. That being said, I still got sick. So it didn't prevent me from entirely also being impacted by a certain way of life.
Interesting when you say that. Did you feel like when you were doing that, kind of like, creating that balance, was it because you've always felt like that is something you needed in life? Because I can totally relate to that. There were definitely moments where, obviously, I've been working for 10 odd years, over a decade as well. Same as you, HR is not exactly the kind of profession that disassociates you from other people's feelings and emotions, right? It's the very job itself. So it's very easy to kind of get yourself, surrounded by people who are emotional or people who are going through different things. And they tend to come to you because you're supposed to be that safe space for them. So I totally understand that. But there were also definitely times where I kind of feel, because I'm seeing it happen in other people, I tend to really take a step back and reflect on my own either journey or, my lifestyle at that time. And then it makes it such a conscious effort for me to go, I need to strike a balance. Otherwise, I would be looking at what would happen to me. Did you ever have those moments throughout your career?
I certainly had moments where I felt like, okay, I need to balance, or when I felt, I went a bit too deep into my HR work sometimes, specifically when I facilitated big reorganizations. Then I noticed I was very much at my limits. The equalizer that came from me usually was, I was always very interested in spirituality. I also, when I was traveling, I usually traveled, did retreats or went to places that sort of always reminded me of what is also important. Back then, I would say it was still a bit more on a superficial level, on the contrary to now. But this that I want to have joy in my life, and that I want to, for me, it's always being surrounded by music. It's such an important part in my life that I would always seek out these experiences since I was actually very young. So it didn't come as a counterbalance. It had to coexist in a way, which was not always very easy.
I bet it's not easy for you to kind of like amalgamate that into your lifestyle, especially in such a hectic profession as well. You mentioned something around like the superficial efforts. What do you mean by that?
It's very interesting. Superficial efforts is like, you go to the retreat and then you come back and it's like, oh yeah, now I need to kind of have this mindfulness practice. And you come all back, like you glowed up. But actually the journey is oftentimes much more deeper than that. And maybe I heard also from many people that were facing, for example, burnout, they were grateful that it taught them something. And for me, it was also, I'm grateful that the fact that my body at some point that said like, hey, not like this, it taught me something. So then you have to go one level deeper than, hey, I'm meditating. And figure out what are actually the patterns that drive you. Burnout is very much, as we talk about burnout here, is very much looked at it as like a corporate thing. It happens in corporate and it happens to the employees, and the employer is the one. Well, I always believe it takes two to tango. Certainly employers have a big responsibility. There's a lot I can say that needs to be done different. But it's always also important that we look at ourselves and go a little bit deeper on like, why does it happen to me that I consistently overstep my own boundaries? What is it that does that? And that's sometimes a journey of a couple of years. Let's say our modern healthcare or the systems we work with, specifically when it comes to burnout, people, if they are lucky, they get therapy. They don't facilitate that journey very well, I believe. And so, yeah, it's like 10-day meditation retreat cannot fix years of overstepping your own boundaries.
Yeah,
so it's a longer journey, same as a meditation app that an employer gives to you will not certainly fix the burnout problem that we face at the moment in the corporate world. It won't. It's deeper than that.
I really, really love your honesty in that particular angle, because so what I'm really hearing what you're saying is, there's such a powerful distinction between people overusing the word burnout and thinking that it's only something that physically happens to you. Most of the time it shows up in a physical manner first, right? Like your body's giving up, they're giving you signs, you're exhausted, you're not really performing. But a lot of times burnout is a direct association with what happens in the workplace, right? There's something to point to it. But ever so often, you also hear people actually go through burnout because of their personal lives that they couldn't really cope with, right? It's a coping mechanism for all of us, and not all of us have the same thing. So when people do associate burnout with, simply the fact that it's exhaustion, it can also really be misalignment, like what you're saying, right?
Mhm.
And other than it being described as a physical wipeout, you're also talking about how it's the misalignment in your spirituality that creates this depletion in you. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So first of all, it's quite interesting. I spoke with somebody today, and I'm coming back to this. Like this is like a corporate or workplace problem. Many creatives face burnout. For example, they do what they love. They are very excited about what they do. They bring their creativity to life. What makes them oftentimes burn out is the financial insecurity, or that it's not, it's a very volatile market. You have to often like apply for fundings, etc. So it's very big space of insecurity, oftentimes not stable, and that makes them burn out. So the fact that how burnout also comes up is not only by overexerting yourself physically. This is how it shows up, but this is oftentimes not the cause, so to say. So when I talk about misalignment, I talk about also that, yeah, we are multidimensional beings. Like we have a body, but we also have an emotional body, we have a mental body, and we have a, let's say, a spiritual body. So if we do things that are completely in misalignment with what makes us happy, not only what makes us happy, but where we seek fulfillment, or we feel like we matter to some extent, then of course that reflects on a physical basis at some point, right? Because maybe we don't sleep so well, and then it's so to say like a flywheel that comes together. And there are people that perfectly work jobs that maybe do not make them entirely happy. That's not their fulfillment, but they live a healthy and content life. So, and those things made me realize that burnout is not only working too much.
Mm.
So, for
Mm.
example, I probably sometimes work now more than I used to, but my body takes it on a completely different level. There is no inner resistance anymore because I'm more aligned with the environment that I work in. And those things certainly make a difference, and it all influences each other, right? Because I like to say sometimes we are full but not whole. And I think the burnout journey for many people is to understand, okay, what's wholeness for me? I'm full, but I'm not whole, right? So this is where this misalignment oftentimes shows up.
It's so important to ask about your wholeness. If I'm being
Yeah.
perfectly honest, it was only until I went through my second burnout that I started asking myself that very question. As you can imagine, the irony in my profession is I work with business leaders to create a sustainable culture where people feel fulfilled. People are there to work their hardest, or at least feel that they're here for their passion, because we always believe that passion brings better talent. So I was always operating under that principle, except there was a day where I kind of asked myself, is this still something I'm feeling the most passionate about? Is this why I'm starting to feel the misalignment, which then has led to me feeling a lot more tired easier because it's no longer fulfilling? And that was the only time after so many
Mm,
years I realized the true definition of looking for wholeness. So
yeah.
if you were to speak to someone who is just listening to this for the first time in their lives, how would you define wholeness?
I think wholeness is a state, and for me, it's very hard to define it with words. I think I learned in my journey that you know when it's there, but sometimes you don't know when it's not there.
Mm.
So it's for me, it's something. It's yeah. Some in a maybe more spiritual setting, you might say like it's a frequency, like or something. But it's very hard to describe. But I think a sense of wholeness is probably what also a lot of people refer to with like self love. For example, I can say I probably feel whole when I stop rejecting myself constantly, when I stop trying to please everybody, when I stop trying to prove my strength to others, when I stop trying to be perfect to others because I'm only okay if others like me or if others approve of me or of my work in that sense. Because those are basically also the driver behaviors that help, that amplify burnout behaviors, right? So wholeness is also maybe a state you matter no matter what. It's not about that you have to perform or that you have to be useful to a society or that you have to be productive or that you need to bring that revenue, right? Like wholeness is also that you're okay when you rest. A tree, right? A tree is just there. It's completely whole all the time. It's just there, It doesn't have these driver behaviors. And that's maybe the easiest, for me, easiest explanation I could come up with. There's probably people that are able to do that much better, but that's, I guess, my definition for it at the moment.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I really love your honesty here because I think, like you said, the word burnout gets thrown around a lot, especially in the workplace. It's also very recently becoming the very thing that we can blame, right?
Yes.
Whenever something doesn't happen or doesn't fulfill you in your workplace. For example, when you've got toxic leadership, then it leads to burnout. Everything seems to end up leading to burnout without us really truly understanding how do we get out of it. So let's talk about achievers and performers. And I know you do work with them, especially. So leaders per se, any high achievers tend to think to themselves that they hit burnout because it feels like it's a wake-up call for them to reevaluate their meaning, their alignment, like you said, fulfillment or wholeness. What is it about them?
About high achieving leaders, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, I would say that if we talk about just like this word performance, which sometimes even like starts to trigger me a bit in a way, we tend to think that we can do that always 24/7, right? That our bodies just kind of do that, but we are not designed for that. No one is designed for that. No animal is designed for that. And we are also basically just animals with a very strong thinking mind. And so I think what it is for many people that we think like, okay, we can push and we can always perform and we need to earn rest. Rest and ease is our natural state. Performance is actually the one that we prepare for and we rest for, right? The moments where it matters. Now, modern work culture has kind of skewed that all a bit. But I think that's what I noticed about those high achieving leaders, just like this achieving and the sense of needing to give 105, 110, 200% at all times. And not allowing oneself to rest and to recover, I think that is a big element. And that is the element that probably impacts the workplace at most. Because if somebody's not performing, because in HR, one of the most questions people come to is like, oh, my employee is not performing. So what can we do? People do not know how to handle people that are not working, not performing, or there might be an issue, a problem. And I think it is also about becoming a bit, getting a deeper understanding that not everything is burnout, right? Sometimes it's grief. How many people go into a burnout after they lost a family member? It's a lot of unprocessed grief, and then getting thrown into a performance focused workplace, and then maybe having this underlying need to prove oneself. That's a perfect recipe to, at some point, be in burnout. And leaders sometimes don't have the literacy to have the right conversations. And by the way, I include HR leaders. I didn't have the literacy to have these conversations back then. So I guess this is what I would say about what is it about the high achieving leaders and what's important in the workplace.
And I remember we talked about this 4 energy quadrants that you work through. Why don't we unpack that a little bit?
Yeah. So I didn't develop them, obviously. It's somebody called Tony Schwartz, I think. And there's like 4 energy quadrants, and they are related to, if they're related to, let's say, a positive state of mind or negative, and high and low energy. So for example, the performance zone is positive and you're filled with like high energy. And then of course, a positive mind state and a bit lower energy is what we would call recovery, right? This is when we feel calm, peaceful, at ease. We feel very engaged usually in the performance zone if it's right. And then there is a burnout and a survival zone. Now, the burnout zone is most certainly the one where you are, and that's not, by the way, directly corresponding to burnout, what many take as a diagnosis, but it can. So that is the zone of really low energy and a very depleted state of mind. Whereas the survival zone, and that is actually the zone where I believe a lot of people are in, it's a state of high but negative energy, right? It's anger, it's often frustration, it's being triggered constantly and maybe being in that fight flight response to and that is a state where many people actually I work with are in. They might not be even yet in the burnout state. It might be diagnosed as burnout, but they are in very unprocessed, triggered situation. It's a lot of unprocessed emotion, but that also gets the label burnout, right? Oftentimes. So as a human, naturally, we have to move through these states naturally somehow. But we believe, obviously, we only work between, most of the time we spend in performance, but that's not possible. And our bodies don't do that anyway, right? Our bodies need more rest the older we become. Our bodies need to pre-rest for certain things. So in the course of the day, we need to also have recovery times. And often not even that happens.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, especially as the older you get, the more rest you feel like you're having to earn for it rather than actually incorporating that into kind of like your natural state of something you do. So that visual of the four energy quadrants has been really helpful. I think many of us are conditioned, like you said, to believe that being in performance mode is the ultimate. And hopefully you want to be 110%, or like you say, 200%, just as expected all the time.
Yeah.
Because modern workplace has associated us with performance means overworking. That's the reality, right?
Yeah.
But like you said, even professional athletes I know that I've spoken to have spent more time recovering than performing. And yet the modern workplace hasn't quite learned that yet. So for someone who's listening right now who say, they're going through their minds and they go, I'm constantly on the go. What is it that they can start doing to restore that balance? They may not think that they need it, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually the thing. Oftentimes we only know that we need it when we are in these extreme survival or in the burnout zones, right? What I would think is people should learn the skill of having contact with their body again. So that can be through mindfulness exercises, and that doesn't even have to be long. That can be 3 minutes per day. I just spoke to a client this morning who started a 3 minutes breathing exercise for better sleep, and it starts working. So it's not like we need to do all these big things. It's small and it's in contact with the body. So I work a lot with mindfulness and breath work to start learning, when does my body actually say stop? Or when does my body give me signals? Because we override them. How many times do people go to a work dinner at a team offsite and they are actually entirely depleted already? We've all been, I think, to these situations, absolutely emotionally and mentally depleted. And then we go to these organized fun things that also then steals us sleep, which then makes us coming completely tired from these team travels. So get in touch with your body. That's the first thing I would say. And start a routine that enables you to think a little bit like, hey, okay, why am I actually saying sometimes yes when I should say no? How do I contribute to that situation? And I truly want to also say, and that's a skill that's lacking in the workplace, people are different. There are people that are very sensitive to a lot of energies. And I'm not talking about introvert, extrovert, but some people need more time to recover and they need less people around them. Those people do not need to be forced into being 5 days in an office for 12 hours. That is a design for them to not feel good and to be exhausted. So that's why it's also important to see what works for you and not look at others and what works for them. Because there are people that are highly energetic and that can easily work a lot without burning out. And there are people that have just different, and it's not like one is stronger or weaker than the others. People just have different energies. It's entirely normal.
And especially also respecting the fact that people have different circumstances and different needs that actually feeds their energy, right? We know that.
Absolutely.
So I imagine, coming back to this topic here, I imagine for leaders in workplaces nowadays, it also means that they're, technically responsible for creating the type of workplaces where recovery isn't seen as a weakness, right? We know that there are some companies who have mental health days, but they tend to take those days because they probably ran out of annual leave or they want to have a break and things like that. Or sometimes, I've also had clients where they have, no meetings Fridays. But actually, guess what happens on those Fridays? More work gets piled onto you, right?
Yeah.
So the responsibility of leaders is what I'm really hearing that's not happening right now. I also agree that it's probably not their fault because you don't know what you don't know. So how do we start surfacing the right kind of conversation to enable leaders to know exactly what to be doing in the workplaces, creating the spaces for recovery, which is really important, like you said, but also creating sustainable performance because we all want to be performing. But sustainable performance isn't something that is going to come easy.
Yeah. So I would call on the responsibility for leaders to start doing certain work themselves. It's very easy to do a mental health day or to say all these things, but you know me by now. I'm trying to speak quite openly. I'm done with not putting the money where their mouth is. I did a little survey amongst like a couple of HR leaders and leaders how much burnout is a topic in their teams and how much they need support. There was no budget for training. There was no budget for simple mindfulness, stress response training for all of the people that I interviewed. And I think it was around 20. I mean, it's not a big sample, but it's enough to get a sense of what's happening. Because it starts also with basic nervous system regulation practices. So learning how to deal with stress is basic biology. It's not rocket science. You don't need to go to a meditation retreat to learn that. It's biology, and some of the basics we need to learn, and we need to equip our leaders to be able to do that for themselves. Because usually, when there is a team that's burning out, there's a dysregulated leader. A regulated leader knows the impact they have in the room. A dysregulated leader is the one that's micromanaging, that's not clear on priorities, that has a hard time to say no to their boss. So it's about learning self-regulation for yourself to learn these skills. And then it might be a bit controversial for many. And then it's having clear conversation. I think it's important that leaders sometimes talk also to their employees and say like, hey, so I see what's going on here. What do you want to do? What is it? What are you going to do about it? And leaders are avoiding certain conversations also a lot.
I imagine they're also avoiding the conversation, not just because it's a tough one, but it's also because they probably don't have an answer for it. As leaders, I think most of the time we're expected to have the answers. You're supposed to be the role models people look up to. But I hear what you're saying because I remember a time where I worked with a CEO founder who openly talks about his burnout situations. Prior to the company that he was in at that time when we were working together, he had a massive burnout. So he was quite open. He's one of those really vulnerable leaders that would openly talk about his emotions and so forth. But I remember significantly the team environment was very sustainable in the sense that people felt that there was this safe space to talk about what was bothering them, what was causing them to feel limited in their performance, you may call it, or the quality of their work or the rest that they're getting. It comes to a point where because the leader was so capable of actually being vulnerable, albeit not having answers all the time, like you said, right? Burnout is a very personal situation. You know, you may go through it in different circumstances, but you may also experience it differently. It will never be exactly the same. So I've learned. But because we had that environment where we had a vulnerable leader, everyone felt okay to take a rest when they need to. So that has actually created a much better sustainable environment. And since then, I don't think I've actually met another leader that was capable of doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's also often really the small things, the leaders that write emails late, and all of these, let's say, small behaviors that somehow mattered. I once had a leader; they were so perfect that really had an impact on. They were so perfect in even talking about rest, but then the actions taken were the late emails, the correcting the email spelling mistakes.
No.
That has an impact. That has an impact on the team, because then the team starts to do that themselves, right? That's yeah. It's really good that you bring that up. It's about vulnerability for sure. Also, as a leader.
I hear you. That's a really beautiful perspective that you've brought on here. I mean, I love the fact that you kind of said, burnout isn't failure. And I think we all associate it with failure. You've given up. Your body has given up. You're not strong enough, and this is weakness. But actually, it's just feedback, right? If you
Yeah.
look at it that way, ideally, it's the signals that you should be receiving because something's not working. It doesn't make it bad, it's just not working. And it's time for us to reflect our actions. And our
Yeah.
bodies, our emotions, our spiritual beings, like you said, they're all trying to tell us something. So, what's your perspective on people who don't believe that they actually need to change their ways?
I would say then they have to, for me, to be honest, I reached that space where it's like, I don't tell people if they need to change or not. If their life is working for them, great. So if somebody doesn't believe that their ways need to be changed, and if they tell themselves a story that for them is working, then that's fine, because I believe that we get, life is a very cyclical thing. We run like with patterns that we get acquired, well, that we acquire from our childhood usually. If we learn in our childhood already early that we are, that we need to be the functioning one, we get into the role of a caretaker very early. And we keep on with going on that pattern, then we sustain it as long as it's kind of working for us. And there will be a point when it's not working. And then we either continue and override that learning, and many people do. There are people that leave jobs in burnout, start an own company themselves, and almost in the next burnout. And that's usually when they haven't dealt with the cause.
Yeah, I've seen that far too often.
It happens. And then it's sometimes then you have to learn to really like, okay, what is it in me, which belief, maybe, if you will, which unprocessed situation or unaware situation, a situation I was not aware for so long, keeps me doing this to myself. And people will learn in their own time.
You're
So
absolutely right.
there's a responsibility also, of course. Workplaces need to be better, and they need to be often different. They need to have clearer priorities and more appreciation, and more freedom in terms of work. There's so much that they can do better, and they need to specifically train people on how to deal with these things much better. They need to equip HR much better. So there's I could probably record 3 podcasts on this, but never forget, the person that has the burnout is the one that needs to also be dealing with it. The whole world can do other things if the person's done, because we are empowered people. We always think we need somebody else to empower us, but we own our lives and we take the decisions. We don't accidentally end up in our lives. So it's about the ownership and taking that deeper. That's the superficial thing that I faced back then. Need to look deeper and say, like, okay, what is it actually that keeps on working, like with these companies that completely exhaust me?
What are you getting yourself into that you can't seem to get yourself out of?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that has been incredible, Theresa. Before we close the session, I do want to ask, what is your golden advice for someone who is probably feeling pretty edged out? They're feeling quite burnout at the moment. What can they do for themselves at the moment?
Yeah, as I said earlier, find ways to get in touch in your body. Our life happens in our bodies, not in our minds. We think most of the time we spend here in our minds, but we live in our bodies. We are animals, and get back in touch with your body. And that doesn't necessarily mean only a sports practice. Slow walks in nature, mindfulness. There's a lot of small ways that, by the way, don't cost a dime to get in touch with the body. And I think that is, for me, the absolute first thing to do.
And I don't think I hear that very often, because I think we usually only start to react when something really bad has already happened to us. I mean, I am one guilty of that, right? I didn't know what I was doing wrong to myself. I didn't take any responsibilities on what was happening to me, even after the fact, until I actually had to take a moment to take myself out of the equation and get that quietness to finally be able to kind of feel, if I'm doing the right kind of reflection, I'm going to reclaim my life again. But if I didn't do that intentionally, I probably wouldn't be here today.
Pattern. And yeah, that's exactly the thing. I love your reflection, like looking in hindsight. And yeah, it's really lovely to exchange that with you.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Theresa, for your incredible and very wise advice today. And I know you work with lots of people, especially who are associating themselves with burnout. So thanks for your incredible work as well.
Thank you. My pleasure to have shared this podcast with you.
Great. So if anybody wants to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
They can find me obviously on LinkedIn, Theresa Baeumel, and then I am on Instagram. My Instagram is Guided by Theresa. There I offer also all kinds of different ways to deal with burnout, somatic coaching, Kundalini yoga, and psychedelic assisted work. So yes, this is how they can get in touch with me. I'm a very communicative person. So just drop me a DM for anyone who is interested in finding out more. And I'd love to get back to you.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, thank you for your time today.
Thank you too.
Great. Okay. If this episode resonated with you today, make sure to follow and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a conversation as important as this. The Burnout Detox Kit is here to make sure ambitious people like you recover from the burnout without losing themselves in the process. So if you know someone navigating burnout right now, workplace toxicity, even simply trying to hold it all together, share this episode with them. You never know who might need to hear it. I thank you for your courage today, and thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next episode.